Thank you for coming, and first of all I want to say Happy International Men's Day, everyone. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. I say ourselves, I'm not a man, but I want to give you a round of applause anyway. So I really just want to say thank you for coming, and this has been a wonderful opportunity to get everyone together. We've got some new faces. Some people have been in the scene for a long time, and some people are you know, or on YouTube, or they're comedians. So we're trying to, you know, mix it up a little bit and make it a little bit more interesting. So I think that's all I have to say, really. I'll leave it to Jordan. Jordan's just going to tell you a little bit about why he thinks International Men's Day is great. And then after that, we're going to have a film from Fiedelbogen, which I'm sure you'll find really interesting.
Hello, darlings. Kicking the microphone already. Very good. Yeah, International Men's Day is a very special day, as you are... Hello, sorry, I had the same problem earlier with the megaphone. Can I make it taller, actually? Yes. Much better. So, yeah, as we all know, International Men's Day is a very special day, hence why we're all here. But I wanted to talk about International Men's Day from the perspective of time and how my first International Men's Day... Up higher? Is that good? Hello? I'm very good at this, very talented, I know what I'm doing. But no, my first International Men's Day was 2 years ago, where there was the anti-male genital mutilation demonstration in Parliament Square. And I tried to organise a few friends to come along, but the weather scared them off, the cold, bleary rain. But I came along on my own anyway, and that for me was my moment. You know, we all know the issues, we all know the problems, we've all seen the stuff online, we've read the papers, and we know what's going wrong. But when you actually take it offline, take it off from learning about it, actually go out there and do something, that's where the magic is, and that's where it was for me. And I've never looked back. You know, that cold, rainy day, standing out there with a sign, watching people go past in their cars, honking their horns, you know, cheering us on, that was special. And I'm really glad that year on year I've seen more and more people coming along, how the numbers are growing, how, you know, all of you are here today. And honestly, I just look forward to, you know, the future International Men's Day and all the work we can do, all the fantastic things that so many of you in the audience are doing, you know, standing up for male equalities and putting your necks on the line, because let's not lie, we do face a bit of opposition. And the fact that you're also willing to take this risk and get involved, for me, personally, thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's great to see you here today, and thank you very much for to the organisers for inviting me to talk. I've never spoken to such a big audience, so it's really terrific. Thank you. Okay. Now I don't know if you're going to agree with what I'm going to say, but that's never bothered me. Anyway, yes. So it's actually called "How Getting Rid of Patriarchy Will Lead to the Extinction of the Feminist Race." Now, the existence of an oppressive, exploitative patriarchy is as fundamental to feminism as the concept of an all-loving father is to the Christian belief in God. And while most of us reject feminism, we go along with their interpretation of patriarchy. However, I think we need to tackle this assumption that patriarchy is inherently antithetical to equality. It's simply a form of social organisation, and it doesn't mean that men have more power than women. The portrayal of it as a very bad thing is fundamentally misconstrued. To understand the origins of patriarchy, we need to look at patterns of human reproduction, which are shaped by the biological difference between the sexes. In the time a woman could make one baby, a man could make a great many more. And this meant that men could be extremely reproductively successful if they invested in mating. Women, by contrast, had to invest in their offspring, and the genes of those women who did not care for their children were very unlikely to survive. And as women invest so much more in parenting and do not have the same potential to have large numbers of children, they're very much more picky about with whom they have sex. So women are likely to have selected mates who have produced the healthiest children, mates who would provide and protect for their children, and mates who would hang around. But perhaps the most important factor in ensuring the well-being of children is that women appear to have always chosen mates who have higher levels of status and resources, however that is culturally defined. And the fact that women do this and have always done so is not in doubt. It has been supported by endless studies with extremely large sample sizes, as well as studies on marriage and divorce. The result was that men focused on and competed for the attainment of status and resources, and the more successful they were, the more likely they were to reproduce. One way of looking at this is that the more intensively women insisted on bestowing their favours on men who had a higher social status, the more they cement a subordinate position for themselves. Another way of looking at it is that as men strive for power and status, not to fulfil the need for world domination, as feminists insist, but simply in order to attract females, and sex is their reward. A third way of conceptualising it is that by encouraging men to provide for them, they pull men into chains of dependency which lie at the core of any human society. Believing that the welfare of other people depends on you is a great spur to altruistic feelings and socially responsible behaviour. Whichever way you look at it, or however you choose to conceptualise it, the result is patriarchy, a system of organisation outside the family in which the overwhelming number of upper positions in hierarchies are occupied by males. And once we place the emphasis on female selection processes, gay men are no longer an evolutionary anomaly. Experts at male bonding, they probably had status and resources, and they were much more likely to be reproductively monogamous. So gay men must have been quite a catch. It's only with the advent of gay liberation which has made them so out of bounds. It's also worth remembering that in prehistory, only 40% of males actually reproduced, so this suggests rape was not a successful adaptation. If it had been, 60% of men would not have been evolutionary dead ends. And this system, by pulling men into caring for children and their mothers, worked very well to serve women's interests. In fact, it probably served women's interests better than men's. And without it, as we're increasingly seeing, men will be inclined and are inclined to just do whatever they want. And I would say the vestiges, traces of this patriarchy are still with us, and they go on fueling the feminist myth-making, either until feminism drives its adherents into extinction, or until feminists realise that patriarchy is benign and possibly even beneficial. I can make a guess at what will happen first. Now, the context in which females operated the processes of selection was one in which a reproductively successful strategy for men was to seek out a large number of sexual partners, and human males, like other primates, were not subject to the same evolutionary pressure where survival of offspring required him to hang around. So women had a number of biological adaptations which facilitated monogamous behaviour. I won't go into those. But one of the chief mechanisms by which women kept men investing in their children was through a sort of invisible contract agreed among females to restrict male access to casual sex. If women together operated a mechanism of sexual withholding, women's mates were more likely to stick with them because reproductive opportunities were not around. So avoiding casual sex was both essential for selecting the most promising mate and for ensuring paternal involvement. Women's extreme discomfort with casual sexual activity is an evolutionary adaptation, and I suggest this explains much of the confusion which females feel when they engage in casual sex. In this way, females help to secure paternal provisioning. However, I suspect female machinations would not have been sufficient, and the fathers who were best at provisioning were the ones where a powerful emotional attachment evolved. Discussion of emotional attachment is surprisingly absent from the discussions on evolution of fatherhood and male behaviour. However, the wretchedness which men experience when deprived of contact with their children is evidence that this attachment is probably highly evolved. There is plenty of evidence to show paternal provisioning contributed to reproductive fitness, albeit sometimes indirectly. But it's also possible that male provisioning actually helped us to develop into Homo sapiens rather than some more simple-minded ape. For example, human juveniles take significantly longer to mature than other primates, and this would have facilitated the acquisition of language, culture, social cooperation, and numerous skills. The possibility of an extended childhood was ensured by male providing and protecting, which would have created a safer framework for children to take longer to mature. Without this, it seems likely that human juveniles would have had to have matured far more quickly in order to increase their chances of survival. An absolutely key feature of our evolution as Homo sapiens was our large brains. Brains require a huge amount of extra energy, and a lot of effort will have gone into providing these food sources, which would have enabled the large brain of Homo sapiens to grow. And also, compared to other primates, females give birth to big-brained, fat offspring who are comparatively premature. If humans had had to wait till their babies were more developed before giving birth to them, their brains would not have become so large. So again, this is made possible by male providing and provisioning, which meant that a mother could be focused simply on her child while the child was still very young. In this way, I would argue that male protecting and providing has not only been essential for survival, it has helped us to evolve into Homo sapiens, and therefore male provisioning and protecting, I would argue, is absolutely fundamental to who we are. Now, all of this is important to understand the role of fathers and what they still do. If we look at mothers, I would suggest we have an almost physical instinct to care for their child. This has been successfully eroded in modern society. However, had it not been there at the outset, children would have been unlikely to survive. The day-to-day type of direct caring which mothering involves is the yardstick of parenting. Increasingly, it is the model by which we judge men. Before going further, I'd like to stress that men are equally competent, frequently more competent in the care of their children than women. However, subject to the usual caveats of blurred boundaries and means, fathering has evolved very differently from mothering, and I would like to identify the characteristics of fathering which make it unique. Through provisioning and protection, which we have already discussed, a father puts his status and resources at the disposal of his offspring. Where a mother bestows upon a child direct physical care, the father bestows resources on his child, which he has gained through this social role. In this way, just as a mother may experience the child as a physical extension of herself, the father experiences the child as a social extension of himself. And this might help to explain the tradition of giving the child the father's name. Not only does this alert the father's other children with different mothers that they might be related to each other, in the absence of sharing a direct physical substance. It's an adaptation which might encourage the father to invest in a child who is at least socially an extension of himself. So the father's location between the family and the wider social world makes him a mediator between the private realm of home and family and the public social sphere. A mother's whole focus is on the survival and well-being of her own children, although she will cooperate with others if this provides a means for her child's interests to be fulfilled. However, ultimately, she is in competition with other mothers for resources in the interests of home, and the interests of the home and family are particularistic. But maturation and the development of human culture involve movement into wider society, and men are uniquely well placed to facilitate this. Firstly, men already have a place in the hierarchy through the process of competition for status and resources. However, what makes men different both from women and other non-human species is that they like to fight and compete as a group. This is demonstrated through archaeological evidence from intergroup warfare. Men have a long history of bonding together in solidarity to defeat another group. So while men may compete for each other for sexual partners, they will turn around and cooperate with those same individuals when the enemy appears. And this gives men a special role in transcending the particularistic ties of their own individual family and creating wider social groupings to provide a scaffold on which society is built. So men as fathers have a special role in enabling their child to negotiate the transition from family to this wider social realm. Their role as providers and protectors, in the broader sense of the word, acts as the initial spur to altruistic feeling. I would suggest that this is the defining feature of fatherhood on which other behaviours are hinged. As Palkovitz and Christensen explain, providing has always been more than a paycheck. It is a complex, multi-dimensional role that manifests a father's emotional and psychological connection to his children through meeting their needs. It is why, on becoming fathers, men often step up their hours of employment or their wages. Even before a child appears on the horizon, production is linked with reproduction. The two are intrinsically bound. As a result, it is not unemployed fathers with time on their hands who are most keen to interact with their children, but those who are gainfully employed. Exceptions to this may be men whose status in the public realm and ability to provide resources has already been secured. It is also interesting to note that even full-time fathers appear to persistently be engaged in economic activities or activities through which they can maintain some status in the public realm. So, for example, while looking after their children, they might become engaged in activities on eBay, building extensions or fixing cars. Alternatively, they might become a sports coach or a school governor. It's also interesting to note how many full-time fathers become daddy bloggers, thereby trying to make their experience relevant to the public realm. Some have conceptualized their activities with their children as challenging gender ideologies, thus focusing on the wider social context, ensuring that their activities have a purpose which extend beyond the home. Research evidence suggests that even when fathers appear to be engaged in primary caring, they're actually doing this in a different way from the mother. So, for example, they're much more likely to take their children on trips and adventures, bicycle rides and so forth, to explore the outside world. They focus much more than mothers on playing, which in its interaction with other objects, people, rules, social interaction, can be seen as preparation for the world of work. Engaging in ball games and other sports introduces children to a rule-bound universe and the competition of the outside world. They also encourage risk-taking through exploration, rough-and-tumble play, as well as intellectual failure in challenging games. Again, when dealing with a child's problems, men dwell less on how the child feels than with how to solve the problem, again, with moving the child from himself to the world beyond. Fathers are also more likely to encourage a child's independence. The child must make her own sandwiches, tie their own shoelaces, pack their own bag, all of which is a preparation for the outside world. In this way, fathers are involved in knitting their children into society and helping them to carve a place in the outside world. So, just as patriarchy is a product and expression of reproductive interests, as patriarchy is eroded, reproductive potentialities are undermined. And there are many different pathways, but it is the way that the destruction of patriarchy is eroding the role of the father, which I will focus on here. And this happens at a number of levels. A feminized education system contributes to severely falling male attainment in education. Downward pressure in the employment market undermines the male ability to provide. Male provision is substituted by the welfare state. Custodial arrangements which give no de facto rights to the father, the persistent portrayal of men as a risk to their families. However, I would like to suggest there is an even more pernicious dimension to the erosion of fatherhood. Feminism is eroding the concept of father. I don't want to dwell on the whole transgender debacle. This is a product of feminism, despite protestations of Germaine Greer and Julie Bindel. They see their ideology of gender deconstructionism come to fruition and are hoisted by their own petard. In contemporary society, there is an assumption that men and women are completely interchangeable, and just as in the workplace, the ideal is gender equality, which really means gender sameness. So gender sameness is the ideal in the home. However, the reality is not that the mother's and father's roles are interchangeable. Rather, there is a risk that our understanding of what constitutes parenting is reduced to the mother's role. The reality is that mothers provide the template for parenting, and fathers are increasingly playing the role of allo-mothers, an anthropological term to describe any individual apart from the mother who helps the mother care for and provision her young. Now, when male parents care for their children, they are, of course, fathering. Sex determination plays a bigger role than gender constructionism, as I've already argued, even the most full-time fathers will parent differently from mothers. Fathering is what fathers do. However, I do think there is a risk that as fathers enthusiastically embrace feminism, they are encouraged to become allo-mothers and lose sight of what fathering is about. The risks become increasingly the case as fathers lose access to status, resources and social positioning which made fathers different, in particular their connections to the outside world. It also becomes increasingly difficult to play the role of father when the place of men in society is so strongly undermined. When fathers practice maternal behaviour, it is this which is more likely to be rewarded with favourable custody arrangements by the court. Fathers are seen as violent abusers and generally not very useful. Consequently, the concept of fatherhood as a position of difference but of equal value and status, is increasingly undermined. The loss of fatherhood is symptomatic of the loss of patriarchy, and the loss of patriarchy is central to the constellation of factors which are resulting in Western society's failure to reproduce itself. Detailed demographic evidence confirms that those sections of populations which are secular, liberal, and highly educated reproduce at much lower rates than the religious, traditional, conservative sections of the population. Sociological evidence too shows that within the same society, men and women with traditional values reproduce at higher rates than those with egalitarian beliefs. And while people become more conservative on having children, children born to egalitarian families are more likely to lose those egalitarian beliefs. In fact, the demographer Philip Longman explains how the greatly expanded childless segments of contemporary society are drawn disproportionately from the feminist countercultural movements. As a result, they will leave no genetic legacy, nor will their psychological and emotional influence compare with that of their parents. He's a major demographer, by the way, not some crank or anything. He goes on to identify a defining feature between those societies which fail to reproduce and those which are successful, and that defining feature is patriarchy. Societies which abandon fatherhood and patriarchy simply will not survive.